Fire Emblem fans, we've never been more back, baby. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave was just announced and is a brand new Fire Emblem that appears to take place in Fodlan, the setting of Fire Emblem Three Houses, and is releasing in 2026 for the Switch 2. It appears to be a sequel, or potentially a prequel, with tons of familiar mechanics and concepts, as well as a particular familiar face appearing in this very first reveal trailer. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium-like Man. Let's do some analysis, shall we? Hello everyone, if you enjoy what I do, including what is now going to be my ongoing coverage of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. So yes, the next era of Fire Emblem is here. We are moving away from Fire Emblem Engage and back into the lands of Three Houses, so we can of course prepare for 5 more years of Three Houses discourse. Before that discourse begins, however, we're going to be discussing this entire reveal trailer, which I will have the trailer linked in the description if you haven't seen it, by the way. I definitely recommend that you go and check it out, going over everything we've seen and what it means for the game. We're going to discuss the setting itself, as well as the plot, the character designs, all the mechanical info we can glean, and we're going to speculate on where in the timeline this game may take place. We'll start with the setting and the plot, and I'll have timestamps in the description for each specific section. Note as well that if you have not yet played Three Houses and you intend to, I will be discussing some heavy spoilers from that game as part of our speculation about this one. You have been warned, nothing that can be done about it. Let's begin. Our setting is a very deserty nation with this sort of almost Roman Colosseum vibe going on. I believe it's possible that we are actually on a new continent entirely, for reasons that we will discuss in a minute, and as there's a generally more fantasy feeling to the world at the moment. However, there may be more here than what meets the eye, with small hints such as this girl with her very modern looking glasses, and this monk/priestess who just has a straight up gun that shoots magic. So, you know, a little bit more going on here than you would think. It's noteworthy as well that this shot in particular has some similar looking architecture to that seen in Agarthan structures like Shambhala in Three Houses. This may be a hint to the timeline, but we'll talk about that more at the end of the video, particularly in relation to one of the revealed characters. For now though, what is the plot? The plot revolves around a gladiatorial contest known as the Heroic Games, overseen by the self-proclaimed quote-unquote divine sovereign, perhaps our divine dragon analog, though more on that later as well. He promises that he will grant whatever wish the victor of the contest desires, and as such, a number of combatants have stepped forward to try and take up the challenge. Whether we're going to have the chance to use all of these characters, or if we have to choose one as our main character with branching stories, similarly to Three Houses, is currently unknown, but we do have plenty of info about them. First off, we have Kai, a country boy who joins the games to save his father's life, whatever that might mean. It's possible that he's our actual main protagonist character, as we've seen him running around on the overall map, and he's the first character introduced, so he may wind up joining one of the other characters. He appears to be a mounted lance and sword user, at least at baseline, with his class listed as a Flying Orneus Rider, which I'm assuming is what this chicken chocobo thing is. It's possible that he may be able to tame other animals to ride as well, as might be kind of his personal shtick. And notably, as you can see here, he holds the Crest of Albin, which is extremely interesting. The Crest of Albin is a lost crest that was held by Yuri in Three Houses and is the crest of one of the 4 apostles, dark outcast individuals who are very integral to the plot of the Cindered Shadows DLC for that game, and which add a lot to the overall story of Seros and the Nabateans and all of that fun stuff. We know very little about it, but it's very interesting that Kai has the crest and that he and Yuri both have purple hair as well. This is, I'm sure, going to be extremely important. Next up, we have Theodora, a noble warrioress who commands her own army and is a brutal combatant in her own right. She appears to be equipped in bone armor that is quite reminiscent of the hero relic weapons, which again has very interesting implications, because that would mean it's like actual dragon bone, and there's certain individuals who probably wouldn't be too happy about that, so curious to see if that's actually the case. She's notably listed as the Noble class, the only one we have seen thus far, and is apparently uniquely able to use gambits from Three Houses as a personal ability due to her own standing army. Similarly to Kai, she also wields spears. Next up, and most interesting to me, is Dietrich, an Alucard-esque foreign fighter with ties to the Lamine bloodline from Three Houses. Not only does he look very similar to Mercedes and Yuritsa, he wields a sword named Answerer, which is imbued with the crest of Lamine, which is the family crest held by Mercedes and Yuritsa, and which is clearly a hero's relic similar to the ones from Three Houses. Speaking of things coming from Three Houses, he also has the personal skill Murderous Intent, which is the same skill used by Yuritsa when he's in his Death Knight persona during the course of that game. We see here that he is shown sailing through a storm, and combined with his unique appearance and gear compared to everyone else we've seen thus far, I do think this implies that he may have come from Fodlin for the contest. It's also worth noting that his sword appears fairly similar to Marianne's Blutgang from Three Houses, although that was a different weapon that used a different crest, so I'm not sure if this is intentional or not. He has the Myrmidon class, interesting enough, and can use skills like a teleport that costs HP to navigate terrain and jump on enemies. Definitely the most interesting character thus far, and I'm wondering just how far they're going to lean into the vampire vibe, seeing as how he literally talks about here's warm blood in the trailer. So, very interesting that. Finally, for our main cast, we have Leda, a beautiful and alluring dancer/bard who's entered the contest seeking revenge against a man she hates that just killing him would not be enough, so that's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out. Her class is listed as Hunter, but she also appears to wield instruments and dark magic to play songs. These songs deal damage, buff allies, and, oh, you know, most notably, summon demonic beasts. Like those demonic beasts from Three Houses, like crest corrupted individuals. This is very, very concerning implications here. It is, of course, worth noting as well that we saw a number of other characters who will clearly be important, if not outright playable, both from cutscenes and on the battlefield, but there's very little for us to actually uncover about them at this point, so we're going to leave that for a future video where we get more info about them. Speaking of all these characters, though, we have to talk about the designs and the art style for this game. I mean, as far as the actual character designs are concerned, I'm in love. These are very different from what we've seen in pretty much any other Fire Emblem game, I will absolutely give you that, but they also look fantastic. Gone are the garish colors, ridiculous lace, and God forbid the Colgate hair of Engage. Now we have actual sick-looking bone armor, realistic commoner's clothing, beautiful flowing robes with complementary reds and greens and tans, and of course, classic black armor with gold and silver trim, which always looks boss. It looks fantastical, yet believable, and best of all, nobody looks like they fell in the Target bargain bin and just decided to roll with it. The characters that we saw in the cutscenes all looked fantastic as well. There's really not a single design through this whole trailer that pained me in the way so many of Engage's designs did. I know there's plenty of you out there who really enjoyed Engage's designs, but I think the vast majority of us did not. I'm glad to see a little bit of a return to form here. Of course, as part of that, the overall art style is also fantastic, with the apparent return of Kurahara Chinatsu, the stellar artist behind Three Houses, on full display. Extremely happy to see her back and her work once again in Fire Emblem. Now, with the setting and the characters and the art style discussed, you know we got to talk mechanics, right? The bread and butter of any good turn-based strategy RPG. We've got some new classes and potential weapon types here, as well as combat arts and gambits, map exploration, and a new, very interesting seeming blaze arts system and associated gauge. There's a ton to discuss here. We're going to start with the weapons and classes, get through them pretty quick. Thus far for weapons, we've seen all of the FE classics return except for one. We've got swords, axes, lances, bows, and tomes, all represented as you would expect. We haven't seen staves yet, though. I would imagine that they're here, but you never know. We could be doing something funky with our healing in this game, which would certainly be interesting. We also see, though, that the recently added hand-to-hand or gauntlets are back, so we may see our healing come in there somehow as well. Then, of course, as we mentioned, there's that gun that's being wielded by that priestess, so it's very possible that they'll be usable as well. Going to be interesting to see how that shakes out and how they balance that. As far as materials for weapons are concerned, we've seen that iron and bronze weapons are back. We've even seen wooden weapons as well as a new, even lower quality material. What effects they'll have isn't exactly known at the moment, although there is some interesting info in the weapon box here, such as this symbol that seems to imply a damage boost against mounted targets for the bronze spear. And we can even see here that there's apparently a curse stat that weapons can have, which is concerning. Not entirely sure what that's going to entail, but I'll be excited to find out. Also, I think this is just placeholder here before someone points it out. I don't think that the bronze spear is typically going to have a 50% crit rate. I feel like we've seen this in trailers before where they'll manipulate the stats of some characters and weapons to get a more dramatic effect for Fire Emblem games. I don't see 50 crit being the baseline for a bronze spear, but maybe, we'll see, who knows. As far as abilities are concerned, we've seen that each character, or at least each main character, probably has their own abilities through the Blaze Arts system, and some have their own unique systems as well, as mentioned in their profiles above. For example, Kai can dismount and potentially get new mounts to acquire different combat skills, and Theodora can use the gambits from 3 houses, such as this Disturbing Strike that we see. That's the name, not me being like, oh, that's a Disturbing Strike, that can immobilize multiple adjacent targets while dealing damage. As far as Blaze arts are concerned, we see Dietrich here that can teleport and attack using his arts, and Leda can use her songs through her arts. We don't know much about the Blaze Arts mechanic yet, but it does appear that they each cost a certain amount of HP and will each move the Blaze gauge forward by a certain amount, something we'll talk about here in a sec. I do really like this though. It's nice to see an evolution of the using HP to do things system, something that we saw in Fire Emblem Echoes, where we used our HP to cast magic and the like. So it's always fun to have new ways to mess with your different resources to get big explosive effects, as long as it's balanced well, but I feel like this might be pretty cool to see. Speaking of moving the Blaze gauge forward, once the gauge is full, it looks like you can activate more powerful arts, which then drain a section of the gauge afterwards. So you kind of like build up to them using your HP, get a big explosive ultimate attack that also seems to cost a lot of HP, and then reset and do it all over again. As part of this, it's notable that here, Leda also has a manage gauge option in her menu, but it's grayed out in this shot and it's not used, so we don't know exactly how that works, if you can like vent part of your gauge or something, or if maybe there's a danger to having your gauge full too often. I don't know, we'll have to see. As mentioned, we do also see the return of generic combat arts. We don't really see them actually functioning here in the trailer, but I would imagine that they pretty much work like 3 houses, where they cost weapon durability, are class specific, and then give you some nice effects like making an attack magical damage for 1 attack, or giving you extra range on your bow shot, or stunning an enemy, or getting effective damage against armored, or whatever. They're most likely going to be something similar to that, and I'm really happy to see them return, because this feels like it's a pretty staple function of the series at this point, something that we really don't want to see gone unless it's replaced with another interesting system, which would also be good. As far as the classes are concerned, we haven't seen too much in terms of new stuff other than the main character's unique classes, but we did see here with this shot with Kai that a form of vehicles exists now due to chariots. And we can see they're actually marked here as both mounted and, again, what I'll say vehicles, which I'm assuming will then give different weapon effectiveness. Maybe vehicles will have better stats against infantry or something along those lines. I'm sure there'll be all sorts of fun modifiers to go along with that. Now, the question is, will we be able to use them? Is there like a specific class that can use it, or can you equip someone with a chariot? Who knows, but that one's going to be fun, I think. As far as map exploration is concerned, we didn't see much, basically just this one shot of Kai running through a city map, but I assume, seeing as how it's been a mainstay for the last few entries in the series, it will be seeing the return of exploring your base or your city or your town or whatever, going to different facilities, buying weapons, talking to characters, yada yada yada. Hopefully it's tuned down a bit from what the monastery and the castle were in 3 Houses and Engage, because they were major time sinks, but we'll have to see, and I can't say that I'm surprised that something like this might exist. It's definitely become pretty synonymous with Fire Emblem at this point. Finally, with discussion of all the mechanics and characters and art style and everything out of the way, we do have to speculate a little bit on when and where this game takes place in the 3 Houses timeline. Even over the course of writing and recording this script, I've really been back and forth on my thoughts about exactly how this is going to go down, but I think I've settled on this being a game set at some point post 3 Houses, again, on a different continent. I've seen a lot of different discussion already just since the trailer came out a couple of hours ago, but I'm pretty confident in this one. First, there's absolutely zero mention of Nemesis, Seiros, or the possibility of war for the Nabateans, none of the things that are standards of the setting pre the events of 3 Houses. Things that we know happened, that we even saw pieces of, no sign of it here whatsoever. In fact, everything seems to be pretty standalone until you start knowing what to look for, like the aforementioned crests that Kai and Dietrich have. It's also worth noting that if we were in Nabatea or anything like it, the Divine Sovereign would be very much at odds with the existence of the female progenitor god of Fodlan, so I don't really see that being a thing. But there's 2 real nails in the coffin, however, the first of which is, again, Dietrich. As I mentioned, not only does he severely stick out in appearance and the style of his armor compared to all the rest of the cast that we've seen, he's also wielding a relic that would have to have been made from a Nabatean as part of the war between Seiros and Nemesis. These weapons were made for that war and for Nemesis and his troops before he turned on Seiros. So to me, this is a clear-cut indicator that this takes place after those events at some point. Combine that with the shot of him at sea, I feel like it's pretty clear that we're not in Fodlan, that Dietrich left there to come here for the contest. Now, I hear you already. There's going to be some of you that are saying it's possible that Dietrich is an ancestor of Mercedes and Yuritsa, of course. There's a huge span of time in between the events of Three Houses and the death of Sothis and the events with the war with Nemesis and all that fun stuff. However, there's one more point that we haven't mentioned. Sothis herself appears in her little mind palace in this very trailer at the very end. But this time, she's all grown up. Now, beyond the discussion about where on the planet or in the world of Three Houses we are, and regardless of where in the timeline we are, this has dozens of lore implications on its own. But we're not talking about those right now. What's important for this point of speculation is that she, as far as we know, only exists in the Mind Palace post her death during the war. As far as we are aware, as far as I'm aware, and I feel like I'm pretty well read on my history when it comes to Three Houses, Sothis exists in the Mind Palace. She manifested here, was reborn here, or whatever, as part of the Fire Emblem crest. Thus, her age during Three Houses, because she'd been asleep, she was dormant, she wasn't really active. It only makes sense for her to be grown in the Mind Palace if this game takes place after her awakening in Three Houses. And to even add on to that, she has dialogue in the trailer that is particularly telling, and which makes it so that this is either clearly a sequel or being baited. If you haven't seen it, I will play that little clip of dialogue for you here so you can draw your own conclusions.
The years were long, weren't they? Have you forgotten me so soon?
Now, whether this implies that Sothis is talking to Byleth and Byleth is somehow here reanimated in a character, or if Kai is not actually like our focal point character and we'll have an avatar character again who's like a reincarnation of Byleth or something like that. It's possible that Sothis is talking to us, the player, like we're doing a fourth wall break type of thing. But regardless, that sense of familiarity to me is either bait or it's supposed to be a clear indicator that this is something that is taking place after the events of Three Houses. If that is the case, I would imagine part of the reason that we're most likely not on Fodlan anymore is so that Intelligent Systems doesn't have to commit to a specific canon route in Three Houses. That's kind of part of the fun, deciding on what route you take and what that means for the world. And I know it's not the most fun thing to actually canonize one of those routes and kind of invalidate everyone else's choices with them. So they can probably get away from doing that by going to a different continent and only having some references to Three Houses. But I do absolutely think that this is a sequel and we're going to see some other connections to the previous games as we find out more and more about this new title. But there we have it. Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave is officially revealed, and I'm absolutely over the moon about it. But what about you? What are your thoughts? I want to see all your opinions about what we've seen thus far and have those discussions in the comments. Also, if there's any details that you think I missed or got wrong, please do let me know and I can correct them in a pinned comment or something. I will, of course, be covering every iota of information we get about this game leading up to its release in 2026. So if you want to stay on top of everything there is to know, make sure to subscribe and come along for the ride. Again, let's strike up some conversations in the comments. I will definitely be down there speculating and conversing and arguing and all that fun stuff. We're going to have a very, very exciting lead up to this game, I do believe. And hopefully it's earlier in 2026 rather than later, or my poor little heart might explode. Again, though, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there. And remember, be good to each other. Bye now.